Welcome into the Astrology of 2025. My name is Gracey with Northern Astrology. I will be your host through this panel of brilliant astrologers that I have gathered from all over the place to join us to have this conversation about the historic and quite groundbreaking astrology of the year ahead. So, January 1st, kicking off the nodes being at 0 degrees Aries and 0 degrees Libra, which means it's a fresh start for all of us. And we will go from January 1st until the end of March in the first quarter, and then it'll be broken up in 3-month segments from there. So I am very excited to bring you this project. It's been a little bit in the making for a while, so it is something that I look forward to bringing you and letting you guys get to know the other astrologers. We've got Alessia from Life Through Spirit, Jamal, the Night of Sages, and we have Amanda from Astro Healing Council, and then of course yours truly. I will be joining them to kind of moderate and help paint the picture of what we're going to be seeing for the times ahead. And I really like to be able to showcase what people are going to be experiencing through a visual type of workbook of sorts. So luckily for you, we have also curated a book that is available on Amazon and also my website in the ebook form for you guys to experience this fever dream of a year ahead. So I am very excited to bring this to you. And without further ado, the Astrology of 2025. All right, so we are jumping into March 1st. We are going to be looking at the myriad of events happening throughout the month of March, and we will be wrapping up all of our discussion at that point, and then you can join us back on April 1st, where we will break down April, May, and June ahead. So going into the last and final month of this quarter that we have in our, discussion here, March 1st, Mercury enters pre-shadow at 26 degrees Pisces, and Mercury is going to be conjunct the North Node at 27 degrees Pisces, and then Venus retrograde just jump starts. Like we talked about February 1st being strong and January 1st being strong, but look at March 1st.
Isn't this when Mercury and Venus are going to be retrograding at the same time, like at the same, almost the same degrees?
I don't think that I've consciously remembered a transit like that. Do you?
I don't, and this is happening multiple times this year. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I feel like Venus and Mercury are just dancing around each other a lot. And we do get to have the same Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius at the end of 2025 that we entered or we finished up in December 2024. So I feel like there's going to be similar themes with that, but it'll be interesting to see how this retrograde season kind of goes.
I just noticed too, Venus entered pre-shadow at 24 Pisces, and so that's around the same degree that Mercury is. Let's see, Mercury is entering its pre-shadow 2 degrees past that. So these will definitely have a lot of crossover. Mercury and Venus just combined, I think of, of course, money, commerce. I think of also like music.
Music's
So,
definitely big.
yeah, I mean, especially in Pisces too. Yeah, I think that's just interesting that they are just so overlapped like that.
And that Venus retrograde, if you guys are not familiar, is the 40-ish days and nights of Venus retrograde. I don't know if you guys have heard of 40 Days and Nights in any other book of reference, but it's definitely a correlated situation there. And in this time, Venus stations retrograde, it is a time that I feel as though you can really just dive deep not only into yourself, but your relationships with others. And how are you guys kind of seeing this? Because Neptune will also be right there along for the ride. I feel like Mercury and Venus are just kind of breaking up this energy for when Neptune fully just pushes through and goes into Aries. I feel like we're getting a lot of not to make it sound drastic, but I will throw this out there that I feel as though these are like last stops along the way before the train fully takes off from the station. And March 1st coming in with like little moments. It's like, hey, look, you might have screwed up in the past. Here's some more time to reconcile with that. Here's some more time to forgive yourself. Here's some more time to clear up the energy where you have felt less than, the time to really get out of the victim mentality and start living in that fierce warrior mentality that Neptune and Aries is going to command of all of us.
I think a lot of times too, whenever Mercury and the North Node get together, it is usually a good, well, natally speaking, it's a really good configuration for public speaking, publishing, journalism, media, those kind of things. It could be said for the transit too, where it's like important conversations are being had, or conversations that are supposed to shift a collective viewpoint or cause forward in a sense, because the North Node is kind of like, where the collective are in that moment. And Mercury is like the messenger. So it's like divine messages or messages that are supposed to shift the collective. And there is this thing again with Pisces where it is not rooted in logical, practical thinking. It's rooted more in imagination, idealization, again, victimization, or sometimes service, servitude. Whereas Mercury, Neptune, usually, I hate to say this, but it's like anything financially that we're hearing about, whether it's crypto or, foreign policy or things like that. There's likely to be a fair level of deception kind of, in the mix whenever we see Neptune and Mercury get together. And you're seeing Mercury in a sign that it doesn't do well in as well. So, that makes me think that there is kind of this sense of maybe, like you said, being deceived or not, told the truth, but also that kind of being something to do with the collective. And, it could even be radicalization about a movement, or to end suffering or things like that. And then there is Mercury, Saturn kind of in the mix as well at the same period, kind of, even though I think they're separating by this point. So critical, important conversations are kind of coming about, as well. Or even you could think of the Neptune Saturn as conversations about deception with authority figures, governing bodies, things like that. I don't want to sound inflammatory, but I have to say too, I do think Mercury Neptune with the North Node, it could be some kind of illness that's going around as well. Sickness is a possibility as well. Now, is it possible we might hear something about, let's say overindulgence, intoxication, or, things like that? That's possible too, but that was the first thing that I came to. I was like, conversations about deceptive authority figures, especially, or where we've been deceived by governing bodies specifically.
That's absolutely huge. Positions of power and positions of authority are going to be loudly under the microscope.
Especially with Venus so close to Pluto as well and kind of slowing down.
And we do see on the 3rd of March, jumping after that, Venus retrograde, that Mercury is going to be in Aries and that will be ruled by the direct Mars. So not only will Venus retrograde be kicking off and kind of giving us a time to reset and to restructure ourselves later on in March as well. There will be that Venus inferior conjunction at 2 degrees Aries as well, where the sun will just shimmy in there, and it's a new cycle as Venus is closest to the Earth and now is in front of the sun, zodiacally speaking. So that'll be very exciting. And yes, I pulled that exactly from my notes because when I start speaking of the Venus synodic cycle, I speak in abstract concepts that make no sense. Mercury and Pisces, gotta love it. But Mercury in Aries being ruled by that Mars direct. The sharpness of Mercury in Aries is something. Do you guys have anyone or anyone that you love with Mercury and Aries? Because I feel like you're entitled to compensation for the things that they say to you.
Oh my God, my Aries friend. Oh, I love her so much. One of my best memories of her is yelling at the bouncer. We were in Vegas and we were trying to get into like this pool party thing. And he was arguing with her, and she, because of the way she was dressed, and she was like too scantily clad for a pool party, which was crazy. But she was just yelling at him. I will never forget that. It was just the best. So, I mean, I love Mercury and Aries because they say what they mean, and they mean what they said.
They also cut the fluff and the BS. And I'm personally a fan of colorful language, we can call it. And that's like one of the significations of Mars and ruling over Aries. And so I really like it. If you need someone to stand up for you, grab your Mercury and Aries friend. They also might be the one to bail you out of jail.
Yeah, very resourceful people. They can put you in jail by association and they'll bail you out too. Don't worry. I love that so much. Yeah, Mercury in Aries is all about that fighting for something. I'm not sure if we're I'm not sure if we're gonna have dramatic causes happening yet. It's Earth. We'll have dramatic causes happening around that time, but I feel like if anything, like it's gonna be vocalized that period of time around the 1st of March, that first week is just gonna be I feel like a radical time. I don't know. It's like in like a lion, out like a lion of March, I feel like. But March, karmically speaking, is a month of great changes. The sun going from Pisces to Aries is known as passing through the 0 point. And it's something that I talk about a lot just because when I see Mercury, especially being going into Aries at that 0 point, anytime any planet, any placement, anything in the sky passes through the 0 point of Aries, I feel like once again we have a collective moment where we can start anew and start fresh. And there is the tendency with Mercury going into pre-shadow here that this might not be the best time to start quote unquote new. But what do you feel with this Mercury being slowly stationing retrograde? Like, is this something that might not feel like the traditional Mercury in Aries, or is it still going to be in that emotional depth with it being ruled with that Mars that recently stationed direct as well?
One thing I just thought about too is if I'm not mistaken, this Mercury transit will coincide with the full moon we had in Aries back in October, I want to say. I think it's around roughly like it was like 8 or 9 degrees or something like that in Aries that we had in October. So I think that's pretty cool. Like, again, it's like 6 months in between or something like that. And now we're in a whole different eclipse cycle as far as the signs are concerned. So I feel like this is like Mercury's like, here's your last message about how North Node in Aries since October has played out for you. And I feel like there's like you said, kind of like a radical step forward in the retrograde. It's like, okay, before you leap into starting this new thing because of this, new arrival, let's rethink of how we jump into things, how we like to start things. Because Mercury in a Mars ruled sign is kind of like the mind conceives it and then the actions start coming as well on like what to do next.
That's
Yeah.
very astute because actually there was a solar eclipse October 2nd at 10 degrees of Libra. So this is opposite of that. And also, October 4th, 2 days later, I'm reading, sorry, Mars entered pre-shadow at 17 of Cancer. So we're bringing it back to that period of time, correlating to that Mars pre-shadow and that eclipse that occurred.
Wow. That is really a full circle moment because that Aries and Libra is going to be loud January and then it's going to be getting louder in March, but it's not the same exact point. But Mercury being in Mercury retrograde being in Aries, I feel like is going to give so much of that revisiting of October. And if October was an uncomfortable month, which it was for me because I just read my journal from October 2024, it's like, cool. Now you get a chance to kind of revisit those areas. And I feel like we can kind of get a chance to rewrite that and maybe be less combative. And I also realized that in America, that was right before the election. So no wonder everyone was on edge. But having the ability to revisit that with maybe a fresher sense of perspective months later is definitely going to be impactful. And then we do have eclipse season kicking off as the next big thing in March. It'll be on National Pi Day on 3/14 if you guys celebrate. I know someone here, Amanda with the numbers, is probably over there doing a lot of math and celebrating Pi Day, so you better.
Every year, you best believe.
I love it. We have this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo at 23 degrees. I know this degree off the top of my head because it is my south node. It is a lion tamer fearlessly rushing into the arena. And I'm not sure what people are going to be doing during this time, but boy, do you need to think before you act, just like Jamal said.
I would say also like 2 weeks before, since it's happening on the 14th, start just paying attention to what's occurring in your life. Because I find that with eclipses, there is this sort of like free shadow, or you can start to see the themes of the eclipses showing up both before and then starting to see how it's going to be an agent of change in your life afterwards and like the following weeks. And so, just paying attention to the body, paying attention to your emotions, the events in your life, jotting them down, journaling, taking photos, or recording yourself speaking if that's more your thing. However you like to sort of record keep, start doing that at least 2 weeks before. And also, just trying to chill out the day of the eclipse instead of trying to do 10 different rituals, which will be noted in the workbook as well.
Yeah, we got to expand on that because a lot of people are on the mindset of I'll do whatever I want whenever I want. But astrologers collectively agree that the quote unquote work during an eclipse season is simply existing in the most part.
Yeah, I would have to agree, especially because there's such big agents of like fate and change. And so, humans love control and I'm the type of person that's like, do what you want to do. I say, just exist, but, dealer's choice. But yeah, if you love control, I can see how that can sort of feel like a little daunting or nerve-wracking to say, oh, I don't want to just exist. I want to do 10 different rituals and try to manifest and control where the current is headed. But I think this is such a beautiful time to just, let the universe do its thing.
Yeah, I didn't listen to those warnings once, and just because I like to give out little helpful stories, I was doing rituals and not rituals like I'm, sacrificing chickens. That's not what rituals are. A lot of people get that in their head and they're like, "What do you do?" I was literally like lighting a candle out on my porch under the moonlight and I did like a lover's return thing and I got hit with the worst men that I've ever met in my life during that time. Like it was just 6 months of dumb relationships, topical shit, people lying nonstop. So, Lover's Return, I got every single lover from a past life that I never wanted to see again, and they all came surging back. So, it's like I learned my lesson a little bit with that. Wasn't necessary for my growth and all that. Absolutely, in the hindsight, as we talk about hindsight astrology, I love that term. Thank you so much, Amanda. Oh my gosh.
A great one.
Knowing that we have control of our fate through our actions. It's something that my sixth house heaviness shows up. It's like I am like, sure, these dreams were insane. Like just to give you reference, I had a dream the other night after watching 2 seasons back to back of a special ops female driven show and then spending all my other free time in Canva. I had a dream that I didn't create a document for special forces over in Kuwait in time on Canva, and then they couldn't do their special mission. And I'm like, Gracie, what have we learned about watching a lot of shows in the background while you're creating? Do you need to have a show about being a trained sniper going while you're doing astrology work? Probably not. So it's like having these moments where I'm like, oh, this hits. It really is having awareness.
Yeah, I think
I,
it's just key. Thank
sorry, go
you.
ahead. I was just gonna say, this is also the start of our VOCs, our void of course moons, the Hellenistic void of course moons that are happening in March. This is a huge deal because this doesn't really happen. So March 10th, so this is 4 days before the eclipse. It's a 58-hour, 27-minute void of course, meaning the moon will not be aspecting any traditional planets during that time. And it's over 30 degrees of not aspecting anything. So yeah, I think that's interesting that that starts right before the eclipse, and then the eclipse happens on the 14th, and then starting on the 16th, we have the next long void of course moon, and then 2 more after that in March. So that's, I don't know what it necessarily means because this doesn't happen all the time,
Yeah,
but
I'm fascinated by this.
ultimately it's like you can't make, the moon's not aspecting anything, so you sort of have to chill, do like wrap things up. Whatever's already in motion is what you're dealing with. You're not really adding on to much or developing anything. So yeah, I don't know what's going to be stopping all of us from that. So
It's
that's
like a nice
a
cosmic break.
question. Yeah, who
I
knows?
really
Yeah,
love
it's
that.
permission to just chill. How
Well,
about
and
Yeah.
that?
it's like if you don't want to subscribe to the eclipse season stagnancy where you're like, hey, just chill, there's another reason to, and it's called the void of course moon. So pay attention. Whew.
Yeah, I think paying attention to when the moon is void is so powerful. Like I've noticed even in the people around me that they're not getting stuff done, they're feeling maybe brain foggy, different things are coming up, and they're just like, I just can't work today. And I'm like, yes, the moon is not working.
Yeah, burnout is huge. I noticed that too.
Yeah, just chill out. It's okay. So yeah, what you said, Gracie, if you don't want to subscribe to the eclipse sort of thing of chilling out and whatnot, at least just observe the void moon and give yourself a break that day because it's clearly written in the stars.
You got to do something to give yourself a break. Like it seems like March is begging for that. Like, how are you feeling about March in general, Jamal? Are you feeling this Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde? It's heavy on the reflection, heavy on the remediation, heavy on the maybe not reconciling. We do have Mars direct, so there's a chance that you got the reconciling and making amends out of your system.
I always kind of say to people that like people who don't like retrogrades are people who don't like to reflect because that's kind of the whole point. So I think what's interesting is that, of course, we have a little bit of like eclipse from the last year activating, and then we're moving into a new eclipse cycle, obviously, still. And then there's the retrograde period. So it's kind of a weird feeling of almost like new stuff is here, new stuff is kind of happening in our lives, but there is this need to kind of not jump straight into this new timeline, right? Which I think is interesting because the North Node is going to be ruled by Jupiter once it's in Pisces, and the South Node is ruled by Mercury. So it's kind of interesting how mercurial things seem to lose their effectiveness when the South Node is in, let's say, a sign. That planet ruler seems to kind of lose its effectiveness temporarily. Like, for example, this last year, South Node in Libra, Venusian things have just not seemed to be as prominent. Mending relationships, harmonizing things, even music, and it just doesn't seem like it's as prominent. It's kind of like in the background. Whereas Martian things, fighting for what you believe in, fighting for a cause, starting controversy, taking a bold new step in a new direction, that seems to be more favored. So I think that's interesting with the retrogrades because I kind of feel like that's like echoing. It's like Mercury is ruling the South Node. We have Mercury retrograde. Of course, it's not a good time for mercurial stuff, and Jupiter stuff is going to seem more prevalent. And add to that, we also have Jupiter and the North Node kind of by signs starting to square, I think, within 12 degrees at this point. So there is this sense that like the way forward, which is like the North Node, or at least that's what we perceive it to be at that time collectively, this is the way that we're moving forward, is kind of in conflict with like the greater benefic, the benevolence, like that Jupiter's known for, or Jupiter's like a narrative, like the narrative that Jupiter's trying to spin when it's in a certain sign. That time that kind of feels like it's in somewhat of a conflict with the prevailing collective thought. So I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic where, again, it's like we're being presented with new information, but we're not really allowed to move forward so smoothly or easily, which I think speaks to Pisces not doing well with mercurial energy, right? And then Jupiter not doing well with Virgo and Gemini energy. So it's kind of an interesting mix, I would say, of feeling like you can't really move forward without having to fact check everything that you're doing.
And I feel like that's kind of where we are as collective is we do have to fact check everything, everyone, and it's very time consuming. It's very much like I think that's where we're getting a lot of the frustration and people just being like, why can't we just have real information? Why can't we just have, real substance in our lives? And I think we're going to go back to that a lot with the authenticity. And you can't get much more authentic than Mercury retrograde in Aries there. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of truth coming to the surface, a lot of harsh truths about ourselves or about the way that we handle others. Mercury is the great communicator, and to have that reflecting back on how do we put ourselves in a deficit when we don't communicate our needs, our wants, our desires, and how do we become the go between for what we want and what we currently have is what I see a lot of Mercury in that Aries position. It's like, okay, we have this underworld bridge of some sort, but how do we make it work for ourselves? And going into the sun, shifting into Aries and the cycle starting anew. I am excited for this one. I feel like this is the turning point for almost everything. not to get too out there about it, but you know, I feel as though this is a really major turning point for us as a civilization. And, you know, we're going to have all the reasons why literally right after the sun goes into Aries. So, how are you feeling about this upcoming Aries season? Where are some strong points for you? Where are some low points? Is there anything that we can talk about in the month of March? Um, Obviously, we have a few stacked things with Venus inferior conjunction, Venus retrograde going into Pisces, the new moon solar eclipse, and then Mercury retrograde. And Aries is wrapping up and think in April, like April. No, that's Venus retrograde, April 12th. So, Amanda, is Mercury retrograde finish in Aries at the very end of the month?
Let me see. Mercury retrograde, stations retrograde, 9 Aries, conjunct Venus retrograde, March 15th. And then Mercury retrogrades re-enters Pisces. So it regresses into Pisces on the 29th. And then when it stations direct at 26 of Pisces, it will be also conjunct Venus retrograde. So
Of course,
and
no
they're just
escape.
tagging along. And also, they're going to have a cazimi with the sun within 2 days of each other. So let's see. Venus, Sun conjunct Mercury on March 24th. That's Mercury retrograde. And March 24th. And then Sun conjunct Venus retrograde March 22nd. So stock market comes to mind. You know, this is a lot of money. This is a lot of money happening. Also, you know, any type of trading, Bitcoin, all that type of thing, crypto. And then I should have mentioned before with Uranus stationing direct last month, that can also affect crypto as well. So I feel like financially during this time, we could be having a lot of issues. You know, we're stepping into Neptune in Aries, and I've heard from other astrologers that it's associated with inflation, like times crazy. Like we already have that right now going, but when it hits that, that could be it's you know Neptune in a fire sign specifically. So not sure how those can correlate to like a double currency retrograde Kazimis. But yeah, financial stuff will likely be in the forefront during this time.
I love that insight.
I wanted to add to what she was saying as well, because I recently had looked into Bitcoin's natal chart, and I know like there was like this whole thing about whole sign and Placidus, and some people still have their opinions, and I'm okay with that. And you could look at it both ways, but let's say if we're talking about Bitcoin's chart, which I believe is Leo rising, if we're doing whole sign, then obviously Virgo is second. And what's interesting is that we have just finished this Mercury and Sagittarius retrograde at the time that we're filming this, right? And what we saw since the Taurus full moon in Scorpio season, a lot of volatility with crypto, especially Bitcoin. And I actually looked back, and the previous retrograde we had was in Leo. Mercury was in Leo, which was months ago now. Also at that time period, Bitcoin was having a lot of volatility. The time before that, Mercury was in Aries, which was almost at this point will be a year prior. So throughout 2024, Bitcoin has had a lot of like historic moments that have somehow been tied into either the Mercury retrograde, the shadow period, or right before or after, or somewhere within the period of Mercury going retrograde. So with Mercury set to do that again next year, you know, I think that's going to be interesting, because what we've seen with Bitcoin is Mercury retrograde doesn't tend to really hurt Bitcoin. It just tends to make it very volatile. Some people like trading that because it kind of is really good if you want to get on a sell, you want to catch that pullback, or if you're looking for a breakout, this is like a really good period because you might kind of luckily find one. Now, is it good for like stable trading or kind of holding? If you're not emotionally good with that, then it's going to be a little harder to do, because the volatility is like one day Bitcoin's up and the next day it pulls back. But I think that will be something that's going to come up. A lot of volatility with the crypto market. And notoriously, Venus retrograde, isn't great for stock market stuff historically. Usually money and, Venusian stuff is kind of like, again, ill, or I wouldn't say ill-equipped, but not effective. And then lastly, I know not long from now after we'll have Sun and Venus kind of getting closer and closer together, which we always see that not only is the retrograde not good for money, but neither is Sun and Venus when they're together in the same sign. Because for whatever reason, we tend to not see, at least on the outside, or at least collectively, we don't observe any real progress happening with Venusian matters when the Sun is in the same sign as Venus. It's almost like there's a block happening there.
Absolutely, and especially Aries, it can be just such a frustrating block, to put it mildly.
Yeah, the sun is blinding it out. You can't see Venus with a telescope anymore when it's in, I think, within 15 degrees, if I'm not mistaken. So it's called, it's the transit of Venus. So yeah, that's a really good point. And then Venus is going to regress into Pisces, conjoin Neptune, and so that's going to only add to, if you're like
The
trying
confusion.
trying to trade on crypto, maybe that day might have you in your feelings. But just I don't know what advice to give on
I
that,
love
but
it.
just be aware that's going to be a emotionally volatile period.
Yeah, because right after that Venus inferior conjunction in Aries, that is going to be where Neptune tiptoes right in as well. And not only is that Venus retrograde in Pisces going to feel like, all right, what have I fallen for during this retrograde? What have I sold myself for? What have I signed my soul away for? This is very much, I feel like, also when Diddy stuff could easily come to another boil. There's a lot about the karmic degrees of Pisces in the last few degrees, and that is all sextile his 29-degree anaretic Mars and Capricorn. So I will be interested for one. The astrologers that make fun of me for saying that he's going to die behind bars because that's too intense. It's like, well, welcome to astrology. Sometimes we know things that we don't want to know, but it's there anyway. So I'm here for all the revelations kind of happening around that time. Also, personally, like a Venus retrograde without finance, without like public figures, and all that. Personally, taking stock of like your own magic is going to be that theme when Neptune makes the aspects and just jumps into the picture there. Because I feel like that's part of like not seeing yourself as the cool magical person that you really are, and not seeing yourself through the lens of the others, or not seeing yourself through the lens of the cosmos. It doesn't matter if you're into human design, if you're into numerology, if you're into meditating, if you're into crystals, if you're into plant-based things. It doesn't matter what you're into. I mean, I can find religious moments in walking down the street and finding trash on the ground, and it gives me an opportunity to better the world around me. Like, there's that meme that says, sorry, you can't be inspired by numbers on a microwave, but astrology girls can. Like, and it's such a vibe that I feel like the community, we're really lacking some magic, and I want some magic and some sense of adventure maybe back when we hit that new moon solar eclipse coming up, because it's like we got one eclipse Virgo on my south node. I don't even want to talk about that one. Talk about Amanda's personal victimizations of transits. They're like, I don't want to do this. So this one is, I feel like, going to be, it's very politically themed. The solar eclipses, it's about like a man representing his country. It's also about not getting got by people who claim to be seers and psychics. Um, so I think that's very interesting too.
Don't get got.
It's my only advice. Don't get got.
Yeah, that's the takeaway.
Absolutely. And what are your vibes with, I mean, the last three days of March are insane. I feel like we can just throw that out there. The buildup of the solar eclipse and Mercury retrograde in Aries just kind of being like all over the place. That's okay. So I have Mercury retrograde in Aries ending that day. Is that what that says? Because for some reason my notes just say Mercury retrograde in Aries with no other notes. I think that's what.
When it stations retrograde.
Yeah, like what's happening with Mercury on the 29th? Because for some reason I have something happening there.
Oh, it's conjunct Neptune at
Gotcha.
29.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's happening. And then Neptune enters Aries on the 30th, first thing in the morning. I feel like that's the big one. I feel like that's the one that we've all been kind of waiting to vocalize. So, Alessia, would you like to kick off the Neptune and Aries discussion? I feel like you'd be perfect for that.
I feel like it might shatter some illusions surrounding, the don't get caught spiritual healers and the psychics and sort of what we were talking about earlier with the people on social media where it's like all the predictions and let me tell you about this and the TikTok astrologers who are maybe also not providing accurate sort of information and predictions can be great, but I think Amanda, you were saying something about like, well, how general are we speaking about and things coming to light in terms of that. But TikTok might also be banned by that point. But either way, well, not in Canada, I don't think.
We're all
Yeah,
moving.
yeah, I don't know what's happening there, but either way, I think there's going to be a lot of things sort of coming to light and who is and who isn't, and putting forth spiritual ideals and beliefs into the world with bold, assertive, I don't want to say like aggressive, but maybe sort of energy where the people who know what they're talking about, I feel like there's going to be that much more confidence for them and this bold energy where they, have this platform that is sort of well deserved.
I love that because you really do feel a sense of starting new with this. It's not the murky waters of the last degrees of Pisces. We have the in the first degree of Aries is a woman rising out of the ocean, a seal embraces her, and it's about coming out of that funk. It's coming out of those depths. And something that would be nice to see is the divide being more of the people who know what they're talking about and the people who don't can just kind of like maybe go back to the basics. This is very much Aries energy is infantile in nature, so it's okay to go back to square one. And there's, like I said, so many times to do that beforehand. Collectively speaking, how are you seeing this transit really impact the world around everyone? And I know that we talked a lot about the spiritual world, but like everyday people who are not spiritual, they don't give a shit about the sky. They are focused on what's literally in front of them or just their very close-knit bubbles. Alessia, do you have anything that like observation wise that could be coming in for that?
Um, I think I more so was like focused on the spiritual stuff coming forward, but I'm
Yeah,
also curious to see relationship to faith and maybe like moving away from that in certain ways. Not I think in dogmatic ways, moving away from that. And sort of um I'm curious to know about like also floods came up with Neptune and Aries. Yeah, I want to be careful about what I'm speaking about because I don't want to incite fear, but yeah, that was a big thing that came up in relationship to water.
I really love that. Excuse me, I really love that. And you mentioned with the aspect with Pluto earlier, with between, Venus and Aries and Mercury and Aries and all that being aspecting Pluto. So this Neptune and Aries will be also aspecting Pluto. And I feel like the dogmatic side, like you brought up, is something that I think is really, especially internationally speaking, there are a lot of countries that have built religion into their foundation, and there are a lot of nationalities that have built this very staunch code of ethics around their religious beliefs. And I feel like some of the veil could easily be lifted with that. So that's a really cool insight. But the flooding, I know that, if we're gonna talk about this, I gotta defer to Man over here with the insights too, because I live in Kansas, so flooding for me is like, all right, we're landlocked where there were nowhere near water, but yet we saw very early on or very late in 2024, we saw what unpreparedness and flooding can do. And I think we all want to avoid that as a collective and have people as aware of nature as possible. So, Amanda, feel free to take that one away.
Absolutely. It's so important to, I think, have a heads up on this because Aries is a cardinal sign. It's the first sign. It's the sign of breaking new ground. Going forth into, something you've never done before, right? So with Neptune there, our coastlines may be going in places they've never been before. So starting new with that. If you are living near a coast and you're kind of already wondering, like, should I move? I'm not saying you need to move, but at least be prepared with the possibility of, needing to have an alternate, situation just in case. Preparation is the key here. So that is a scary, reality, but we would be remiss not to mention it, and to at least give you, an opportunity to be prepared. Furthermore, the last time Neptune was in Aries was February to April 1862 to 1875. And during that time, we had a few major things happen in America. American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, United States Civil War. And you can argue we're already experiencing a version of that. It doesn't always have to look like how it did in the past. We have our modern versions of war, and things that we disagree with as a country. And then we had a Reconstruction era after that. So I'd like to think that we are going through a Reconstruction soon, which I welcome. Our systems, Pluto and Capricorn really showed us, hey, your systems are corrupt. Sorry. So we need to rethink things. So it's good that we're going to be going into a potential energy for Reconstruction. And then something else interesting I'm noticing here. In 1868, the 14th Amendment was ratified, granting citizenship to all persons born in the U.S., including formerly enslaved individuals. So I just find it interesting that we're also discussing citizenship again in this period and how that might be evolved in some way.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. And like we are hitting into some subjects that hold weight and they hold a lot of intensity. They bring a lot of intensity with them, and something as personal and devastating as flooding can be, or as something as frustrating and devastating that not being prepared can be. I feel as though ask anyone in Florida what it's like to deal with the onslaught of tropical storms. Hey, Jamal. So, speaking of that, Mr. Coastline, how are you feeling with Neptune and Aries, and how is your practice kind of preparing others for this?
Um, so honestly, Amanda like hit a lot of points as far as like the American Civil War, and I think with Neptune and Aries, it's kind of similar to like a Mars Neptune thing where anger is not always overtly expressed. However, it can be that anger is used in a way where I want to say disarming propaganda, disarming like power imbalances, because I think people forget that like, or people tend to relate, Pluto with Scorpio energy only, and that's okay. But Mars does rule over Aries as well. So there is a variation where Aries deals with the same things, but just not on the same intensity as Scorpio. And you could also think of it as Mars is more, okay, a great offense is a great defense when it's in Aries. And then in Scorpio, it's like a great defense is a great offense kind of thing, right? So with Mars and Neptune, or even Neptune and Aries, there is a sense of kind of like disarming through subversive ways of anger, or people, seeking to, let's say, be vengeful, or things like that, are not going to get the result they're intending with Neptune, let's say, in a Mars ruled sign, because things with Neptune tend to not go, the way we think they should go, right? And then let's say with Neptune in Pisces, Jupiterian things, travel, culture, tourism. We've kind of seen since 2012 or 2010, I should say, when Neptune entered this sign, that's kind of slowly taken a whole other turn, right? Over the last several years, the tourism industry, how we approach, traveling and, things that are going on in the world, like that's kind of slowly kind of unraveled a little bit, like Jupiter ruled stuff, right? Even, the thing about, spirituality versus religion and, it's kind of becoming a thing where it's permeating into the media now, where it's like the veil is super thin. That's kind of a Neptune thing. So I feel like the same could be said for when Neptune enters a Mars ruled sign. Just even things like sports that we tend to like really rely on for entertainment, it may not be as promising in a sense, or there could be some kind of unraveling that starts to slowly happen with these things. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. Also, too, Mars or Aries makes me think of men. So Neptune in this sign makes me think of the way that we approach manhood, the way we see men collectively. There's some change with that as well. So I'm curious to see. And I actually was talking with a client about this, how like, even though this is going to be a super old reference, like all the older women I know with Neptune and Libra, they're kind of very brash, very like, kind of thing. So I'm curious to see how that's going to unravel as well.
That's so interesting to bring up because, when you think of how men are viewed in this day and age, I will just go ahead and say it. I'm really glad I'm a woman. It's the pressure, it's the lack of care for their mental health, it's a lack of care for their well-being. And divine feminine rage is such a thing that you can harness and power yourself with, but divine masculine rage does look like war. It does look like protecting yourself. It does look like taking down your enemies. It does look like battling the demons that live within and, that can be attacking you at times. But, the boldness that Alessia mentioned with, having this spiritual world kind of being like at the forefront. Do you guys have any like predictions for where astrology will be going with Neptune and Aries? Because like as someone who accidentally ended up on ESPN thanks to astrology, I had no idea that was going to happen, and yet I feel as though things like that are just going to become more commonplace, where we see astrologers popping up in places you never expected them.
Astrologers.
Ooh, love that.
What did you say? Sorry.
I said children astrologers because Mars makes, or I'm sorry, Aries makes me think of youth or like the first. So I'm like, I'm surprised it has to happen yet. It's only a matter of time until look at this astrologer who's 12 years old predicting blah blah blah, like on
That would
like
be the
Channel 5
coolest
News or
thing.
something.
Oh my gosh.
Can't
Can you
wait.
imagine just a little kid that just, either born into it, or I mean, there is this kind of like theory in the human design community that 2027 is when the children that we've been waiting on to be born are being born, because it's this like this energy that I believe definitely correlates with Neptune and Aries. But it's this wave of children that are here to. Like, I got two kids with Neptune in Aquarius. I can tell you that they're the most uninterested in daily life and BS, right? They're just like, leave me alone. I want to go be an alien. But this Neptune and Aries, I feel like you really get back to maybe seeing people that are revolutionary vibes and energy coming to this planet. But it is like, of course, having children in general is terrifying to plan for. You never know what's going to happen, and just blindly trusting the universe that you want to have them in this day and age. Yeah, it's a lot, but maybe the declining birth rates. Have you guys seen a lot of the people talking about declining birth rates? Do you think this could possibly pick up on maybe an increase in that? I don't know.
I think of fertility here with Neptune and like sperm count type thing. Yeah. So perhaps when we get into focusing on health, with all of this, maybe we'll go back to the like, traditional American. I mean, who knows? Focusing on masculinity, like having exercise so that you can, be fit and be a man and all, how it used to be. So focusing on that to remediate the like low sperm count that we're finding and all the like microplastics and where. and everywhere in our body. And but outside of that, I was talking about Aries being like pioneering energy. And for this, with spiritualists, like I feel like they'll be able to support themselves and break new ground and, you know, make history in a way, like the first one to do this, the first one to do that. So that's exciting to me. And yeah, I feel like sperm count is like also
It's funny you say
really
that
loud,
because
right?
I
Yeah.
just learned that the ancients apparently equated semen and sperm with Jupiter. And so I accidentally fell into this thread where everyone is just talking about sperm for like so many tweets. And I'm like, this is so much information that I never wanted. But that squaring Neptune and Aries when Jupiter goes into Cancer, that's going to be crazy. And I feel like that has to be such a surge of children or talks about children.
Fertility.
People have been talking about how the womb is being redesigned to have external wombs created for babies to be born into. I think that's horrifying. And yet, at the same time, if that's the only way someone can have a child, if that's what brings you joy, go for it. But like, I do feel like there are consequences to the things that we explore with Neptune and Aries. But these ideals and these beliefs that Alessia mentioned that I have your notes up. That's why I keep going back to like the bold and assertiveness. It's like this aggressive action, but it could be aggressive towards peace. It could be aggressive towards it's literally whatever I feel like is on your manifest destiny to have this year. You got to attack it with some sort of fervor.
And also with like a spiritual motivation, right? In an Aries sign with Mars, it's like if you're kind of shallow, you might not do as well. Like if you're just doing things for money, I don't think that will apply. Like as we move forward, I feel like we have to always have like a spiritual reason why we're doing things. Otherwise, it's not fulfilling. So, so yeah, spirituality in that sense as well.
I
Yeah,
love
I
it.
think about like desire and being fueled by that like genuine desire and not having it be superficial, like maybe we've seen with Neptune and Pisces from some of those spiritualists, which, going back to the social media, I've heard from a lot of like friends and family that it's really been harmful for them to continue to see, oh, it's going to get better for cardinal signs and just like the generalization. And then they generate all this hope and they find that things don't get better, but in terms of or they feel like it doesn't get better. But in terms of predictions for astrologers, I feel like there might be more businesses or people who have astrologers on payroll, and there's less of a focus on believing in astrology because it exists, whether you like it or not, and you're experiencing it and it is happening.
Hell yes. And I'm going to be real. When I see things where people tweet cardinal signs, this message is for you, I mute them. I can't do it. I can't handle the generalizations. I can't handle
They list
the
half the zodiac.
yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
like Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, Gemini, Aries, Cancer, Pisces. This is all for you. Like how the hell like no. The channeled messages, I do want to say like kind of like a final thoughts. It is one of those things where I see the people that have been faking it getting called out a lot more in the astrology and spiritual community. And there's no wrong way to do astrology unless you're using it to manipulate others. And that is the only thing that I will stand firmly on. The vagueness of stuff, the competition between I used to follow because I was very big into like conspiracy theory Twitter a few years ago, and I used to follow all these like visionaries and all these oracles and all these people who were like, "This is happening." And one time I bought a document from an individual that sells documents for the month ahead, and it's like everything that's going to happen, and it was literally every word you could think of just like thrown onto something with no connotation, no anything, but you have to vet check the sources that you are getting your spirituality from, because someone that is dealing with rough stuff at home is not going to give you the same message as somebody that is created a space, even if they live in a cardboard box by themselves under a place that you would never look to find. If they are at peace and they feel secure, that is the most pure channel that you could get from somebody, is operating from a place of security and not from a place of scarcity or lack. So Neptune and Aries, we need to feed our spiritualist and pay them what they are very well deserving of, and that includes all of us in this chat as well. I keep saying chat like I'm talking to a chat. Like, who am I, 12 years old? But it's very much a thing where I feel like we're going to start seeing people actually being able to make a living out of their practices, and also people paying people what they're worth with this transit.
I think you're right. And I think moving away from Neptune and Pisces, it's interesting. You're like, Jesus was a Pisces. And so there's almost this narrative stemming from that, where it's like you almost have to suffer and endure and starve if you're doing any sort of like spiritual or healing work. And I think we're going to sort of move away from that with Neptune and Aries. But I'm also curious about, we spoke about a little bit about ethics and sort of disclaimers and whatnot when it comes to this work. And so we might see, as we get further into spiritualists and healers gaining, I don't want to use the word power, but like there's been this meme floating around where it's like the healers are in power now. And so, I'm curious if there might be more of a switch towards them having like these ethics and disclaimers, where it's like, this isn't medical advice, but this is how it can help you, and seeing that more on those pages and showing legitimacy through that.
Amen. I'm here for it because boy, do we need it now more than ever. Jamal, did you have any final closing thoughts on Neptune and Aries?
Just that, I've said before, I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out as far as, the cardinal energy of Neptune, because Neptune in a cardinal sign, we haven't seen that since the 90s, which that was Neptune in Capricorn. Neptune doesn't seem to have liked Capricorn too much. I'm curious to see if Neptune will like Aries any better. But social movements seem like it will be a thing as well, because that's kind of a thing that, the millennials are kind of known for. We're kind of known for doing the social movements and the dance crazes. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to continue to play out, because I feel like that's definitely going to be a thing as well.
Yeah, I'm here for that. Like new music, I feel like is coming. Like new styles of music, definitely new life around the music industry, which I think we can all agree is much needed. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And Amanda, did you want to finalize anything and then we can?
Yeah, I have been associating Neptune through Pisces. I think it entered in 2011 with like the social media change that we experienced, to where people started making money, and it was and then like by the end of this transit, middle to end, we saw filters come to life. Like I remember before those existed.
I'm like, am I ugly? What is
Yeah,
this?
yeah. Should I get a nose job because you keep changing the size of my nose? But those filters, I feel like they're at their height right now, and yeah, reconciling the problem with all of that, what's real and what's not, and finally moving into a place where we can say, okay, now we have a way to verify if this is real or not, and you know, especially with Neptune in Capricorn generation being the millennials, that will directly like square that. So that's a good point Jamal brought up. And so yeah, I expect to see a little bit of change as far as the deception that is possible, and putting hopefully a little bit of regulation on that in some way or a way to tell.
I'm almost wondering if plastic surgery will become the new filter, because Mars does pertain to like cutting, and there's been a lot more talk around what celebrities have done, and like Lindsay Lohan, for example. And so I feel like we might move away from filters and just towards like the actual cutting and the plastic surgery, and that becoming the new sort of real life filter that we're seeing.
Wow. I know, I love that because I got into media in 2014, and I was convinced at that point that since I wasn't stick thin and bleach blonde hair, that I wasn't going to make it on the sidelines of ESPN. So I'm like, screw it. I'm going to go with purple hair and I'm going to be eccentric and all over the place. And I slowly started to filter my face, edit my face, change what I looked like, and it was so easy. But I made a pact to myself in 2021 after I did a photo shoot, and I was like, well, time to edit. And the photographer's like, excuse me, your face is perfect. Stop messing with my photos. And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, I have to change my eyebrow, just looking different here. Like, what if people think my face is weak? Like, it just ridiculous amounts of kind of like a psychosis that I feel like Neptune and Pisces has really put with our image and how we present ourselves. So, if anything, I feel like January, February, and March gives us a chance to really face who we are as people, as ourselves, without the mask, without the layers of importance. Who are you without your titles, without your labels? And a lot of kind of like ground zero, very much square one energy where we kind of find ourselves being like, all right, so are we going to continue to pull the wool over our own eyes about our talents, our gifts, our purpose, all of it? So I'm so here for that filter lifestyle being swept away. I got weirded out with it when everyone turned into animals. I'm like, why are we all animals now? Why does everyone have dog ears? I'm so confused.
That was definitely an era.
But on behalf of every single incredible astrologer in this roundtable, I am super excited for the quarter one part of our podcast series, as well as our workbook. If you guys have checked it out yet, if not, all the links will be in the description and you will be able to find that quite easily. And if you are able to access internet and then Amazon, you'll be able to get all of the things that we have to offer. So if you are looking to connect more with an astrologer and you found one of us find like kind of speaks your language, awesome. There will be all the information to book with these talented people as well. And yeah, if you guys have anything plugging that you'd like to do or anything coming up that you'd like to share, feel free to. And we will kind of catch you guys on April 1st. See, I can't even do my own outros.
Yeah, you can find me online on all the socials at Sophia Nova. Um, I spell it with zeros and so S0 and then N0. And then also I have a website, astrohealingcouncil.com. I have my blog there. I will be being very active on my Patreon. So that's where I'm going to post a lot of the personal astrological stories that happen to me that I wouldn't necessarily want all over the internet. But, for my Patreon, I would tell some personal stories and stuff like that, how the astrology is hitting me and stuff like that, and a bunch of other things, just all my thoughts on the transits and everything. So yeah, and you can also book with me and help me get through college. Thanks.
All right. Alessia, would you like to share yours as well?
Yeah, so once again, I'm on Instagram at Life Through Spirit. My website's the same, lifethroughspirit.com. I do share on Substack a lot of writing in terms of like transits, usually behind a paywall that I don't want accessible through there, and I'll share different practices and rituals. But if you have not checked out our workbook, a lot of the rituals that I do share sort of privately behind the paywall and stuff, I've created some and put them in the workbook, which you'll love. And yeah, you can book with me, lifethroughspirit.com.
Awesome. And Jamal, last but not least, where can everyone find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Twitter, also Blue Sky as of late. And it's Young Desperado for all of those. I also have a Patreon and I post a lot of cool stuff in there. I've actually done some predictions. I've done some transit stuff. I've done some lottery winning charts, some business charts. So I have a little bit of everything on there. I am working on a website right now, fingers crossed, that will be finished for the new year. So just stay tuned for that.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much. And we will see you back on April 1st. No April Fool's Day. It's real life. We will be back. Thank you guys so much for watching.